Hey everybody, it's Ken McElroy. I'm here with Danille.
Hello.
So we're here with a good long friend, Mike Dillard. Mike, welcome.
Glad to be here.
So for those of you who don't know Mike, you can check him out on Mike Dillard Training, the Mike Dillard Show. He's very, very well known. He's grown 3 online businesses to over $60 million in revenue. He's had guys on his shows like Tony Robbins, Damon John, Simon Sinek, Tony Hawk, Mike Rowe. The list goes on and on and on. He's got a bunch of companies. When we first met, it was the Elevation Group.
Yep.
And then Self-Made Man, and now Richer Every Day.
Uh-huh.
So anyway, go check him out. But today we're going to talk about, he's in town, which I was really excited about. We had dinner last night with George Gammon and Kiyosaki.
That was fun.
Well, I posted it this morning, and all of a sudden people are like, oh, I wish I was a fly on the wall there.
Yeah.
That was a good dinner.
It was awesome.
Yeah, it was
awesome.
great. But we're going to talk today about, Mike's going to do a talk here in just a couple hours called How Your Subconscious Programs Your Relationship with Money.
Yeah, so it's interesting. You know, you and I have known each other for, 12 years now?
Yeah.
And back when that previous company, the Elevation Group, I started that to really try to understand how the wealthy people actually invested their money, because I recognized that what was being taught and offered to the middle class was not the same thing that you guys and Robert were doing. And this was after the crash of '08, so I really wanted to figure that out. And what that business was all about was strategies. What are the actual strategies that wealthy people use to invest? And I think for a lot of people, that's common sense, and that's typically what they think about and what they want. Okay, I've made money. What's the strategy I need now to build wealth and become successful like Ken, right? And so I thought that that's what it was all about as well. And so I focused on finding these strategies, and I invested in oil and gas. I invested in my buddy's startups. I invested in multifamily real estate. I invested in gold and silver and new companies that I started. And looking back over my 15 plus year history as an entrepreneur, I started to recognize a cycle where I would make a bunch of money and then I would spend it or risk it, and usually lose it, and then have to make it all back again, and then spend it, risk it, and lose it. And it just created this cycle. And that's a very common thing with entrepreneurs. In fact, we call it cycling. And if you've ever sat down with some, VC guys or entrepreneurs who've been around for a while, might ask you, hey, how many times have you cycled, by the way? Meaning, how many times have you lost your money and then made it back? And it's almost like, an initiation in the entrepreneur space. And something interesting happened in 2018, June 13th of 2018, as I was sitting at home, taking a little break from work, playing on the iPad, and I felt a little click in the back of my head. And I was like, that's kind of strange. You don't have nerves that I'm aware of in your brain, so where does that sensation come from? It was really odd, and I didn't really think much about it until that night when I couldn't fall asleep, like for a single minute. And then the next night when I couldn't fall asleep for a single minute, and then the next night, and then the next night. And that went on for about 7 days, and got to a point where my body was shutting down. I basically felt like I was dying, 7 days and nights without a single minute of sleep. And that became a very scary, desperate situation, and called my doctor, and he put me on Xanax and Ambien, which I've never taken either of those in my entire life. That got me about 90 minutes of disassociated, kind of half awake, half asleep type of sleep, which was horrific. And then that turned into suicidal stuff from the medications. And that eventually turned into me living in my bed and then moving to the couch for 20 out of 24 hours a day. Couldn't work anymore, couldn't run my business. Couldn't think, couldn't remember people's names, could barely drive. I'd walk down the streets of downtown Austin where I lived, and I would just get these adrenaline rushes, like the buildings were just going to collapse on me. It was like this irrational paranoia and fear. So I went from racing cars at Circuit of the Americas on the weekend.
Yeah, I saw you do those.
Yeah, and building this next startup to non-functional on the couch and dying for over a year and literally that fast. And it took about a year before it was finally discovered and diagnosed. I went to every doctor you could possibly think of. And the scariest thing in the world, I'll have to tell y'all, is when you get on Google or YouTube and you type in your symptoms and you cannot find a single person who has a similar symptom set, that's scary, because now you don't know what's wrong. You don't know who to call. The doctors don't know what's wrong. And so you lose hope very quickly. But I finally was introduced to a phenomenal doctor, Ann Shippey, who helped save my life in Austin by our mutual friend, JP Newman. And he's like, hey, why don't you go get checked for toxic mold? Because he went through this about 5 years ago, a very bad toxic mold episode. So I was like, sure, went and did that. And she gave me a mycotoxin test, which is what tests for this. And the scale on the test went from 0 to 50. Anything above 5 is in the red and it's toxic. And mycotoxins are a type of neurotoxin. So it literally releases things that get through the brain barrier, and it's basically poison for the brain. And my result, so on a scale of 0 to 50, my result was 21,000.
Jeez.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. It was just like off the chart. Didn't
Well,
even go
now how
there.
were you exposed to that? Did you ever figure that out?
I believe it was the building I was living in downtown Austin about 6 months before that click happened, had flooded all the way down the elevator shafts. We had this torrential flooding in downtown Austin that just shut the city down for a week. And the building just came all the way, the water came all the way down the elevator shafts. They had to shut down the elevators for 3 days, which is not fun when you live on the 26th floor.
Yeah.
And I think mold just started growing, as it does in the South and in Texas within a few weeks, a few months after that, and just filled up the AC systems. And so
That would have been everybody in the building then.
well, what is interesting is there's a gene that allows you to detoxify your body from mycotoxins. And most people have that, but about 20% of people don't have that gene, or it's been turned off, because probably in my case, if you get such a high toxin load in the body literally can't handle it anymore. From an epigenetic standpoint, that gene will just switch, and all of a sudden it just shuts down, and then your body can't detox it, and it builds up, and then it causes neurotoxicity, which led to the brain injury. My symptom was an inability to sleep. Other people, the symptoms show up in different kinds of autoimmune diseases and things like that, right? So interesting intro, because we're talking about money. After a year and a half of this going on, well, at least, okay, we now know what's happening, and I can kind of start to detox and things like that. But it's a 2 to 3 year recovery rate normally for toxic mold. I didn't know how I was going to make a living before that. I was like, I physically can't work anymore. My mind is gone, and that's how I make my money. How am I going to pay the bills? Because I still had my employees and a significant amount of overhead. And so the question became, well, how can I make enough passive investment income to pay rent and the mortgage and the car payments and all of these other things? And so that became kind of the next primary focus for me. And it combined with, it's interesting how your biggest challenges in life can become your biggest blessings. And as I went through the healing process from the brain injury, I went through every type of therapy you could possibly think of. Hypnotherapy, EMDR therapy, transcranial magnetic therapy, neurobiofeedback therapy, MDMA therapy, other different kinds of plant medicine, psychedelics, all kinds of brain scans. Like, if you suggested it, I went and did it. And what I learned as a result of that is how the brain works, how neurotransmitters works, how the subconscious works. And I basically, by default, became an expert in the brain and the human nervous system. And as I went through those different therapies, while they were designed to help heal the trauma to my nervous system and the brain caused by the mold, it actually was the catalyst for me to go back and see and heal many parts of my past in my life, being bullied and different types of trauma that I've gone through. And as a result of that, I could see why I had this particular cycle and why most entrepreneurs have this particular cycle of make it, spend it, risk it. And so most entrepreneurs, when we were having dinner with George last night, he's like, dude, same exact thing with me. Most entrepreneurs become entrepreneurs because they had a challenging childhood. Things were rough, and they have a way from motivation to go do something better with their life and create a better life than what they came from, which is incredibly effective when it comes to motivation. And it also usually means that you experienced a lot of adrenaline when you were young. Again, whether you were being bullied or abused or whatever it may be, there was usually this highly adrenalized, highly sympathetic nervous system state that you were in most of the time. Or you were involved in sports and very competitive, same type of adrenaline, same type of sympathetic nervous system patterning. And what that does is it creates this addiction to adrenaline and cortisol. And we've all talked about or heard, Tony Robbins talk about neurons that fire together, wire together, right? And that becomes kind of your default pathway or mode of operation. And so that becomes the typical pattern for most entrepreneurs that you run into. They're very comfortable with taking risk. They're very comfortable with the adrenaline that comes along with taking that risk. And they're very comfortable with the dopamine and the reward that they get when they overcome that risk and make a lot of money or get a victory of some kind, right? So that becomes the dominant mental pattern for that individual. Now, when they make that money, and now it's time to invest that money, that same desire or need for adrenaline and risk-taking, when applied to investing, is the exact opposite of what you need. That's how you end up investing in Bitcoin in 2013 like me, which turned out to be very lucky, but that's a very rare case, right? A lot of people are doing that now and they'll lose a ton of money like they did in 2017, or they'll invest in a risky new startup that they know nothing about that will lose money. I know tons of entrepreneurs or colleagues in my space will just write a $100,000, $250,000 check because they get a presentation that's a good sales pitch and they're like, boom, here's the check, right? And
I've done that.
Yeah. And
right.
I did that at least 5 or 6 times, and one of them worked out, right? One of them worked out. But it's that same, at the end of the day, what I realized from this entire process is that I was not actually in control of my decision making. You always think that you're making the best possible, most logical decision at every given moment of your time and in your life because you're doing the best that you know how to do, so everything makes sense to you or you wouldn't do it. And the motivating factors that are actually motivating that decision, for most people, are completely unaware of. And that comes down to their neurochemistry and their subconscious programs. And so if you have neurochemistry, from a neurochemistry standpoint, we have dopamine, we have serotonin, we have oxytocin, we have endorphins, and we have cortisol. Dopamine, serotonin, and oxytocin are pleasurable, reward-based hormones, right? That's what we get when we feel good and things like that. Cortisol is an away from motivator. It's what our body releases when we start to feel stress or anxiety. We get cortisol, and that's our body's signal to say we don't like what's going on here. Let's go do something else that's going to give us dopamine or serotonin. Now, when we look at the world today, and America specifically, we have 2 different categories of people. One are people who have a inverted dopamine response. That's about 95 to 98% of society. And then we have people like y'all who I'm going to say have a healthy dopamine response. And so what happens in the modern world that we live in when somebody feels stress or anxiety, which is what they're exposed to all day long through social media and the media today, right? Stress and anxiety and fear creates a ton of cortisol in the body, stress and anxiety. How do we relieve that? We go eat food, we go drink alcohol, or we go shopping. Those are like the 3 primary outlets for the modern day human Homo sapien, right?
Yep.
Before you know it, you've got a pint of ice cream in your hand, you didn't even think about it, or you've got a cocktail, a glass of wine, or you're on Amazon buying something. And so that pattern becomes hardwired into your neurology, and it becomes the default circuit that you operate from whenever you get stressed. And so
it becomes like a stress reliever to do one of those things.
That's the 3 most common,
okay.
Right? For sure. And so if we have, and marketing companies know this, they figured this out decades ago, which is why they try to scare the shit out of us all day long on the media. Here's the medicine or the pill or the whatever to the drink, the alcohol to make that feeling go away so you feel good. Well, all of those things require money to buy. Right? And so now your literal internal subconscious pattern whenever you feel stress or anxiety is to go spend money. And it, at that point, makes it impossible to build wealth. It's literally impossible because your default mode, your default pattern now is to spend money in order to feel good in a world that makes you constantly feel bad. Now, other individuals like yourselves and what I call unicorns, Warren Buffett, have a healthy dopamine response where you get dopamine and you get feel-good chemicals when you save and invest your money. It gives you feelings of security and safety and pleasure and things like that. And so when you have that as your default circuit, building wealth becomes effortless. It becomes easy. In fact, it's like impossible not to build wealth when that is your reward system, just like Warren Buffett living in the same house for 30, 40 years.
Yeah, exactly.
And so, as I realized this, I was like, holy crap. If you don't have awareness of that pattern, and if you have an inverted dopamine response, even if you have this win where you make some money like an athlete or a lottery winner, you're going to lose it, right? And so the way I kind of put this out for people, if this is your default circuitry, and this is you trying to go on a diet because you want to lose weight, right? Default is your daily habits and how you eat and how you work out now or don't work out, whatever it may be. And you're like, I'm going to get motivated for New Year's and I'm going to change my diet and change my life and I'm going to lose weight. So this is a conscious desire and a conscious goal. This requires willpower, and it requires effort, and it requires energy and stamina and calories and all of these things, because it has to overcome the default that's been solidified for 20, 30, 40 years. And guess what? This eventually runs out of steam, runs out of energy, you run out of willpower because it requires effort. And some people, they're strong enough to break through and make it their default. 95% of people don't. Within 4 to 6 weeks, this fades away. They get tired, they get exhausted. And the default's just sitting here kind of waiting to, yeah, cool, let's go back to our normal pattern, right? Because this requires zero effort.
Or, yeah, right. Or like going and getting liposuction or something like that. Something they can purchase and make it temporarily fix it.
Yeah, exactly. And then they get that dopamine or serotonin that they're searching for. They're getting that chemical hit. That chemical goes away, and they just go back to whatever it is that they were wanting. And so if this is your default, the default's always going to win. And so you have to figure out a way to change the default. So how do you do that? You have to rewire your neurochemical addictions. You have to get rid of the addiction to dopamine and cortisol for what it's associated with, eating food, drinking alcohol, or spending money. And you have to rewire that neurochemical addiction to saving money and investing money, right? So that's kind of step number one to the process. Once you do that, okay, cool. Now saving money becomes easy for the first time in your life. And now if you save money, well, then you have money to invest.
But I do think, though, it's also becoming aware of it, right? Because
awareness is the first part.
Right, because when I was, a teacher and in my early 20s and got all this credit card debt, it was like no big deal to just open up another credit card and have another payment. I really wasn't paying any attention to like how much I was spending versus bringing in. And I think I had that dopamine response, by buying, new dresses and new things, but I didn't register that that's what it was.
Right.
But then it was when I moved back home, paid off all my credit card debt, and was like, I can't live on my own if I have all these credit cards, right? So then I was like, I can never go into credit card debt again. So then that was like my start of at least being aware of the fact that I can't just do that. Yep. And then that, I think, slowly transitioned to me being a saver, because I wasn't always a saver. Right. I was more of a spender, right? But then somehow paying attention and keeping track of made me aware of it. Yeah,
so awareness for sure, step number one. And then you have to find a way to create those new patterns, which you found a way to naturally do, right? Which is awesome. And so that's kind of piece number one. Become aware of your neurochemical pattern that you have now. 2, reassociate and create a new pattern so that you're getting the neurotransmitters that you want, the reward system that you want for doing things that are taking actions that are aligned with your actual long-term goals instead of your short-term goals, right?
Well, and that's a good one too, having long-term goals, right? I think when I was spending like that, I didn't really have any. My goal was like, make sure I could pay rent on the first, But then I started to actually want to buy a property. So I think that was my motivator, right?
Yeah. You had a new direction to look towards, right?
Yeah.
For sure.
And putting that money in the bank meant something. It wasn't just like, oh, I just put $1,000 in the bank. I don't know what I'm going to do with that, but that's great. It was like, this is going towards something.
So exactly right. And the way I say that is, if you don't have a plan for your money, it will fall into the hands of somebody else who does.
What do you think about bias? So what I mean by that is, one of the things that I had to punch through my whole life were the biases that I had from my parents that were, from their parents. And so, their biases on all kinds of stuff. Certainly my mom, had we can't afford that. And it was true. In her day, she could not. And so that's all I heard my whole life.
Yeah, so that leads us to part number 2 in the process, which is our subconscious programming. And so whenever we feel these emotions, it's interesting. You could take 100 people and give them $100,000 each and say, you have to all go invest this in the stock market so they're in the same asset category, and we're going to reconvene a year from now and see how everybody does. There is going to be a small number of people who do exceptionally well. There's going to be a large number of people who do little to nothing. There's going to be a large number of people who lose money. And if you were to do that, repeat that experiment, and give that same group another 100,000 in year 2, and then a year in year 3, there's a very good chance that the same people are going to get the same result every single year.
Right.
And so you have people like, Dwayne Johnson, or you guys, or Warren Buffett, who are going to make very different decisions than other people, and they're going to get very different results. And so what's the filter through which this decision is made? So we get the emotion from the cortisol or the dopamine or whatever it is, and then we filter that emotion through we put that through a filter which leads to a specific decision. And that filter is our subconscious programming that we've acquired and built up our entire lives, right? And so most of those programs are acquired between the ages of 5 and 12. And so if you lived in a household where there was poverty, or rich people were evil, or you went to a church where money is sinful, whatever these things may be, what we have to remember is that while we live in a modern world, our biology is prehistoric. It's ancient. It's tens of thousands of years old, and it really only cares about 2 things, which is survival and procreation. At the end of the day, that's all that our genes want. And so if you were 6, 7 years old and you kept hearing this repeat about money, when you were young, all it's thinking, all your primitive brain is thinking, hey, we can't make money, or we have to stay away from money. We can't become rich, because if we are, our family won't like us anymore. Our friends won't like us anymore. We're going to get kicked out of the tribe, which means we're going to die. That's how our primitive brain views the world. We know consciously today that's not the case, but this is an unconscious process. And so if you look at people who've struggled to make money their entire lives, despite reading all of the books, going to all of the seminars, starting all of the businesses, and they keep hitting the ceiling and they can't break through, that is because there is a subconscious programming running in the background that says, we can't make money because that is dangerous. It is not safe to do that. And you are completely unaware of this program, and so you can't fix it. You don't know that it's even operating, and that's why you keep hitting the ceiling, and no matter what you do, you can't break through it. Or if you do break through it, like people who win the lottery, boom, your brain brings you right down to where you're safe, which is the status quo where you've been all your entire life. Now, other people have a different story where money is good, more money is better, more money is safer. Right? And that's probably, y'all's story or my story, where I have had no problems making money my entire life, but my neurochemistry was not aligned with the right reward system. It was wired for risk taking, and that's where that cycle for me came into play. And so I became aware of all of this through the health crisis, and it was just like this giant light bulb moment for me, where it's like, oh, I can see through the matrix now, and I can see why I made the decisions that I made and took the actions that I took. And what was preventing me from building lasting wealth despite the amount of money that I made. And it was just this huge light bulb moment that literally changed my life, and now Michelle's life, and how we approach money and investing now. And now it's our mission to basically help bring this knowledge out into people's awareness and help them repattern their neurochemistry and rewire their subconscious program. And if you want to ask, I think the next logical question to ask, well, how do you rewire your subconscious program?
What's the first step is what I was thinking for the people.
Yeah, well, the neurochemistry is pretty easy. There's very simple things you can do. It's all about interrupting your current pattern. And one of the easiest things you can do is breath work or breathing techniques to do that. Your breath is what controls your nervous system. I can take y'all in any state that you are in, and we can use the breath alone to either take you down into an extremely relaxed parasympathetic state, or we can use it to amp you up into a very activated sympathetic state. This is kind of Wim Hof 101 stuff, but the breath is what controls the nervous system. And then from a subconscious perspective, that's a little bit more challenging, because you really need the outside assistance of somebody else to basically perform brain surgery on you from a programming standpoint, right? It's very hard to perform brain surgery on yourself from a subconscious standpoint, because you can't see what's in there. And even though it's subconscious programs, you still can't see them without somebody's help to reflect them back to you, who knows what to look for and who can see these patterns because they've worked on that. So some of the most effective ways to do it, that's easy, that's legal, that's very effective, is hypnotherapy. I've worked with a therapist, Elliot Rowe, here for the last 2 years, who works with professional athletes, some of the world champions in the professional poker tour, UFC fighters, Fortune 500 CEOs, and he's kind of like the hack that allows those individuals and people like myself to go in and mine through and bring up these subconscious patterns and then reprogram those. And once you reprogram them, they're reprogrammed them.
Yeah.
They're done. And it's awesome. So that's probably the most accessible way to do it. One of the next ways, which has been incredibly effective for me, but it's not necessarily legal, is plant medicines and psychedelics. That's equally effective at taking down the conscious wall so you can access the subconscious and then see exactly why you do what you do, and then rewrite that story. And then once you rewrite it, it's rewritten. And then there's different conscious models that you can use. Neurolinguistic programming and going through NLP training and different seminars from that perspective can be very effective as well. And so those are kind of the a 50,000 foot view of how those take place. But at the end of the day, if you just start with the strategy and look for the investment strategy, and you don't have your neurochemistry aligned with that strategy, and if you don't have a subconscious that is aligned with that strategy, even if you write the check, you're eventually going to blow it up. When you get your return, you're going to do something with that money, stupid with that money. And so, so this is kind of the gift that's come from that process. So,
wow. Well, thank you. I got to share with you a story. Like one of the, as you know, studying with a lot, we don't talk a lot about this piece, but part of the Rich Dad advisors and getting together and studying is we go away. And we've gone for, I've gone for as much as a week, and a lot of it is to kind of reprogram our subconscious. And I remember, this is through a third party essentially, and you're basically going in and doing all these things that are.
Did you go do some ayahuasca, Ken?
I did it, but I was in Peru, and my guide, who's generationally he's Incan. He said that's how Machu Picchu came to be, was is through that. But one of the things that we started studying, Mike, was ascension. So we go and we study, like a topic, whatever it might be, and so what I learned, and all of a sudden when I got back, I became very aware of this ascension topic. And so they were saying, just watch, just look at an athlete, just look at a pastor, whatever. And so what happens is when people get, in some kind of power position, whatever it is, that their habits are all going to show up. They've always been there, but now they're on TV, or they're getting money, or whatever it is, or they're on stage. And so everything that they were doing, they're still doing. They're just now, and so that's when you see these big personalities, they start blowing up, because they were doing the same thing that they were doing when they didn't have that kind of position or that power, that money, or whatever it was. And
just magnified now.
Yeah. And so what it did for me was like, oh, okay, because our patterns, as I watched. Well, I have a lot of friends like yourself that have made a lot of money in their lifetime, and now they don't have any, and mostly around the athlete side, and unless they're just lucky, and so unless you dig in and actually try to take it like you did, that won't change, and so you see these guys, and so when I was luckily, I have friends that have gotten big contracts as, let's say, NFL quarterbacks, and it's like a curse, when you're 23 years old and you get a couple $100 million, like we've had a chance to mess up and kind of learn over time. And so there's a lot of criticism around that, but the same thing with the lottery winners. We were kind of talking about this last night. And so the reason why when you just hand people money, it doesn't change things. And so just the awareness of that for me kind of reprogrammed the way, because I, especially now, I still get nervous. And I don't really feel like I need to buy that next thing.
See that, but that's that's your dopamine response.
Yeah.
You get cortisol when you think about spending money, right? Or other people get pleasure from spending money.
Yeah. It's
right?
true.
So if you want to become wealthy, you have to repattern that neurochemical addiction to your pattern, or you're just going to keep spending money.
Yeah. So it's a process, I guess, is what I was trying to say. Like you got forced into it because of what happened. A lot of people are just comfortable with that little default.
Yeah, and the default stays, and it's kind of this bubble of illusion until they're 60, and now they're all, holy shit.
Yeah.
I've run out of time to actually put myself up for retirement at that point, and that's a really tough position to find
How
yourself
did you
in,
punch through that? Like, because your parents, like I remember her dad was saying, you need to go back. You went to school and you get this job, and you're buying real estate, and all of a sudden, I think that's the other piece, right? We have these other people kind of trying to bring us back into the vortex or whatever, right?
Crabs,
These influences.
Yeah. I mean, it's just being educated. You just have to be educated and have a long-term goal in mind of what you want to do, or else people are going to sway you. And I think, a lot of people sway people in different ways. Like, we should go shopping together, or you should go to this concert with, as you're trying to save money, these little things, or why are you driving an old car? You should get a new car. And, and I think that if you have your long-term goal, I think if you don't have any long-term goal, as Mike said, if you don't have a plan with what you're doing with your money, you're going to spend it, because why wouldn't you? Like, who wants to just save money just for the hell of saving money?
Well, the world, you have to realize every day, every time we get on a device or expose ourselves to media, we are going up against the most sophisticated and effective tools and people in the world when it comes to AI and marketers and copywriters and advertisers. They've never had more sophisticated tools than they do today, where they literally track everybody, right? All day they'll stalk you in every device you go to get you to buy their thing. If you don't have a plan for your money and it's just sitting there, you stand no chance against Ferrari and Gucci and Prada and all of these other companies who are paying tens of millions of dollars to the smartest people on the planet in order to extract your money from your bank account to put it into theirs.
Yeah.
You stand zero chance. You've lost that war. And so you have to have a plan, like you were mentioning.
Unless you understand it.
Understand it and have your own plan.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people, they don't have a plan. If you really talk to them, they just work, they make their money, they spend it, maybe they put a little bit in savings, maybe, but there's really no plan of what they're doing or why they're doing it.
Right.
What do you think? You think it's instant gratification, or, I know, you think that's a big piece of where people are right now? They're not really thinking about tomorrow or a week.
That goes back to the neurochemistry. You're on your phone all day. Social media now has trained us to pursue dopamine like a monkey, just sitting here on a device, pressing the button and, trying to get the hearts and the likes and the views and the whole thing, right? We've really become dopamine and serotonin addicts. And so serotonin is the hormone that our body uses to reward us for increasing our status in society. So it's what we feel when we feel like we're accomplishing something, when we feel like we're being acknowledged for something or rewarded for something. And why does your body want to use serotonin in order to make you feel good when you increase your status? Well, it's because if you had higher status 10,000 years ago, even 5,000 years ago, it increased your chances of survival and it increased your chances of finding a mate. Right? If you were the king or the leader of the tribe or the whatever, you had more status. That was serotonin you were getting. I have more access to food. I have more access to protection and in this group, and I have more access to mates. And my offspring have a higher chance of survival. So that is our genes' way of rewarding us for trying to increase our status in society. Now, in the modern day, how do we express our status, especially if you're single and in your 20s and you're kind of in that prime of where you have that major driver to go find a mate, right? Well, our primary resource today isn't food, or it's not a castle, it's money, right? Money is what buys our resources and buys our food and buys our security. But we don't walk around with our bank account on our shirt, right? Our bank balance. And so the way that we display our status today is through the car that we drive, the house that we have, the clothes that we wear, the watch that we wear, the shoes that we wear. And that's why people so easily fall into the materialism trap, because it's increasing their serotonin, which feels good. I go buy new shoes, I go buy a new car, I feel that serotonin, and And now I'm signaling out to the world publicly my level of status, which is going to help me achieve those two things. Now, what's interesting is that these neurochemicals lose their effectiveness the more you're exposed to them. A great example of this is coffee and caffeine, right? The more coffee and caffeine you have, you get used to it. You have to have more in order to feel that same buzz, and you have to have more to feel that same euphoria. And it's no different with money. So we all start out wanting to make our first $100,000, and then we make that, and it's celebratory, and it feels awesome, and then second 100,000 is a little less celebratory. Third 100,000 is like, okay, this is now the new normal, no big deal. Now we got to go after my million. We all make our million. We feel amazing. We celebrate. Then after that, it becomes boring. It's just another $1 million. Then it becomes 10. Then it becomes 100. And so you have to keep chasing these bigger reward systems. And in the car thing, well, you get your first, you get your first Porsche, feels really cool. And you get your second Porsche, not that great. You move up to a Ferrari, that feels cool. You get your second Ferrari, okay, man, not that cool. You get your third Ferrari, it's just another car, right? I will never forget that. On my third Ferrari, I'm just like, that's my daily driver. And these kids and people are like, holy crap, can I sit in your car? And I'm just like, yeah, man, it's just a car, like, cool. Yeah. And it had just become totally numb to that reward system, right? And so it just keeps pushing you and pushing you and pushing you to spend more and spend more and spend more until you get old enough or you have a health crisis, and then boom, the whole thing blows up and falls apart, and you can't perform the way that you used to.
Yeah,
so.
I know. We were chatting with Robert last night, and he said the reward for a great job is a bigger job.
Yeah,
and it seems like everybody's just on this track,
and it's just our brain chasing a drug.
Yeah,
and what's really interesting is you can hack that. So your brain doesn't know the difference between what's happening in real life and your imagination. That's how visualization works for athletes, right? You can literally, they've done, Asprey talks about the studies that they've done, and Tim Ferriss talks about these as well, where you can visualize lifting weights in your mind a certain amount of time, over a certain period of time, and they'll come back and test. And the people who just visualized gain just as much strength as the people who actually went to the gym.
Yeah.
Right? So you can short circuit this process, and if you want to go shopping and you've got this urge to go buy something, you can actually go through the visualization process of going through that entire experience, feeling the feeling of buying the car, sitting down in the seat, firing the engine, driving around, getting the attention that you might be wanting, or whatever feeling that you're after. You can actually receive that dopamine, receive that serotonin in your brain for free over the course of 30 minutes. And then you can visualize, how is that going to feel a week from now? How is it going to feel 3 months from now? How is it going to feel a year from now? And then you can feel the fact that it's just not that exciting 6 months from now, but you've still got a $5,000 a month car payment coming in.
Yeah.
Right? And
I know.
so that allows you to then make a different decision and to interrupt that pattern that you were heading down.
But visualization does work.
Yeah.
I have friends that do visual boards, and and I've done them in the past. I haven't regularly done them, but I also have friends, athletes that that have used visualization their whole life. We were talking to Seth Joyner, a good friend of ours. I was actually spent the last 2 days with him. And I remember we were having a conversation, and he was NFL Player of the Year years ago for the Eagles, and he got in the NFL Hall of Fame. He's been nominated, and he's in the Eagles Hall of Fame. And he, played at a small school. I think it was Texas El Paso. And we were at dinner, and my kids were, excited to meet him and all that. And he's like, well, the first time that I ever had, an interception, and he reached, and they're like, oh, what was that like? He goes, I'd been there already a lot. He goes, I literally at night, I visualized that play. And so we ran it back for a touchdown or whatever. They were like, wow. And he was trying to teach them visualization. Mm-hmm. He's like, that's all I did.
Yep.
I visualized the way I would play, that next day. And he's very, very bright. So it does work. I know so many wealthy people and so many very successful people that use this technique.
Well, our outside lives is nothing but a reflection of our inner world, right? And so if we just change our inner world, then our outer world is changes. That's how it happens.
Yeah.
So
that's just one more technique.
Yep.
So where do people find you? This has been a fascinating conversation.
Yeah, thank you, brother. RicherEveryday.com is where we teach people how to go through this process. So we take you through phase 1 of the neurochemistry and the subconscious work. In phase 2, we help you set up a system that retrains your chemical addictions to change that dopamine response. And then in phase 3, we teach the passive investment strategies, which your lesson is now part of, that we filmed earlier before this.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, for sure. Yeah, well, thanks, Mike. Richer Everyday, guys. Go there, richereveryday.com, and also take a look at Mike's other stuff. He's a patriot. He's a freedom fighter, and as we all are, right?
At Real Mike Dillard on Instagram if you want the political freedom fighter side while I'm still there and not kicked off. With that being said, I want to give everybody a disclaimer. There are several scam accounts that mimic my account. I will never DM you and talk to you about crypto. I will never do any of that stuff. So just be aware when you follow me, they usually hit you up immediately and ask you to invest in some crypto thing. So that's not me. So just be aware of that.
Awesome. As always, Mike, you're the best.
Yep.
Thanks, brother.
Yeah, love you guys.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank y'all.
Yeah,
Thanks for having me.
cheers.